Welcome back to the Celtic Exchange Weekly. This is Tino. This week I'm joined by James and Miff as we once again cover all things Celtic. Miff, Celtic had to respond to that Rangers defeat with a convincing win against Hearts, and they've done exactly that. What's your key takeaways from the weekend win, and what is up with Craig Gordon?
Hello Tino, hello James. Yes, they did do exactly that. It was what we needed. And I was actually fairly impressed by Hearts, if I'm being honest. I thought they were fairly brave, and it made for an entertaining game. There was a bit of jeopardy in the first half, and it was actually really enjoyable just seeing us trying to solve the conundrum that they presented. However, what it also shows is how deadly we can be when we're swift on that counter and we play our football the right way. Yeah, the Gordon thing really wound me up, got me out of my seat. I need to say, just as you know, for someone who's an ex-Celtic player to rile the fans as regularly as he does, it really grinds my gears. I don't know about the rest of you, but I mean, what are you moaning about? Just he's never conceded a fair goal, I don't think, against Celtic ever. And you know, his petulance after Eddie Panenka him at Hampden just clearly shows he's obviously got a massive problem with us. And I think his ongoing moodiness actually tarnishes his legacy with us.
It is going that way, Miff, and obviously you'd have to say he's a bit of a hero for his time at Celtic during the Invincible season and the couple of seasons beyond. But what do you think, is it any player going back to their former club wants to go back and prove a point, particularly if they maybe feel they've been let go early? And we're not going to waste too much time here in the Craig Gordon chat. But what do you think it is? He's gone so far down the other way. You know, some players come back and they get a warm welcome and they're thanked for their time at the club and all the best and whatever. He's, as you say, he's kind of undoing a lot of good work, isn't he?
Well, for me, I mean, so firstly, I really liked him. Some did, some didn't. He divided opinion. He done brilliantly to win his place back after, you know, Rodgers tried to replace him with De Vries and it didn't happen. So there's a lot commendable about him. I think we can all agree we probably let him go too early as well. At the start of a really important season, he would have been worthy of keeping, albeit that he might not have been happy with that kind of situation. But regardless of that, you know, it was fairly set in stone. He'd done really well for us, was part of the Invincible Treble team. So, you know, history's pretty much assured for you on that. But his subsequent behaviour is just utterly bizarre. I mean, I get he's a competitor and things like that, but the level, I mean, he was up screaming in the ref's face. You know, it's a clear yellow card. He's right outside the box screaming in the ref's face. It's absolute nonsense. And again, I'll be fitting as someone who is a legend of the Scottish game. Mm-hmm. He just looks like an absolute weapon.
For goals, it had absolutely nothing wrong about them. It's not like somebody get wiped out in the midfield before it, or somebody was miles up. There was nothing wrong with the goals. No issues. I don't get it. And as I say, he's a mature player. He's 42 years of age, and
that's the thing.
I think he was good for Celtic at a time where Celtic were good for him. He won various trophies that he would never get near otherwise. Celtic took a gamble on him in terms of his fitness. I just think it's a funny way to respond. But we'll maybe find out in years to come. Maybe he'll bring out the book and we'll find out they had some sort of beef behind the scenes. Who knows? James, speaking of goalkeepers, obviously we've got the concerning news that Kasper Schmeichel, certainly out for the short term, might be for the rest of the season. And in steps Boljami Sinisalo for his first league game at the weekend. How do you think he done, and how do you feel about the prospect of him being the goalie for the rest of the season?
Yeah, so I think they were waiting for some swell to go down for Kasper, and he was getting scanned today from what Rodgers was saying. So we should know in the next day or two the severity of that. Shoulders, complex part of the body, especially for a goalie. So you wouldn't want to be rushing him back, especially if you're not a spring chicken. So just kid gloves with Kasper Schmeichel and hope he comes back and gets back to the form he was in, because he's been great for us this season. I think he was, funny enough, just starting to look like he needed a bit of a break. I thought the distribution side of his game was starting to slide a wee bit. Ironically, he was doing that mad Craig Gordon pass over the head of a striker to a fullback, and that never ends well. So all things considered, get well soon, come back soon. But great to see Sinisalo get his debut, get a clean sheet, and particularly that 15-minute spell in the first half, he had work to do. You know, he smothered a point blank one, bit of a stramash, another one, decent distribution, good vocally with his defenders as well, not shy to tell his defenders when they should have been, you know, not creating so much trouble for him. So yeah, I think a commendable debut, and I'd say in the show last week we want to see him at some point. So that's why the signing was made in the fashion that it was made. That Casper could come in, do what he does, but also have that ready-made, not just backup, but guy training and playing to be your number one. So it's so far so good with a long way to go, I would say.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of stories from the Villa side where some of their fans, by all accounts, were unhappy. They seem to let him go so easily. They've obviously got a World Cup winning goalie at this moment in time, but I don't know who their backup is, and it seems they were annoyed that Sinisalo got let go. Exeter fans raved about him. I think he had the full season down there, played about 50 games last season. He's a regular Finnish international. He doesn't start for Finland either, but he's always in their squads. He's clearly well thought of, and he's doing a lot of good work by the sounds of it with Kasper Schmeichel and Stevie Woods there. There's a good quote from him. I'll read it out just at the moment. He says, "When you get an opportunity to play for this football club, you've got to take it with both hands, and hopefully I can do that. You've got to have that confidence. I've always been a confident man. One coach back in the day always said to me, have confidence to the point of arrogance, but never go above that. You can't be arrogant, but you've got to be confident." On that note, James, is Miff arrogant or is he just confident?
When you're as handsome as Miff, it's very difficult. It's a fine line to tread.
Yeah. What do you think of those quotes? So he does seem a confident guy.
Yeah, and goalies have to be. It's a role for the crackpot. It really is. It's a tough role, and generally attracts the crazy. And we've seen them over the years. So you've got to have that little bit of maverick in you, but absolutely confidence, because defender makes a mistake, midfielder makes a mistake, striker, whatever it may be, there's someone else to mop it up. Oftentimes when you're the goalie make a mistake, it's all on you. So you have to have the confidence yourself that you're not going to make that mistake first and foremost. But if you do, you've got the wherewithal to not let it affect you, and you just keep on in your stride.
Yeah, so it's good to hear that confidence, and it looks like he's certainly going to be the goalie for the foreseeable. You would expect he'll absolutely be in against St Johnstone at the weekend. Kilmarnock beyond that, where Celtic, I think in theory, could just about clinch the league, and then it's a split and whatever falls beyond it. So we'll see with Kasper Schmeichel, but I don't think there's any great concerns over Sinisalo, and actually I think quite a lot of folk are quite excited, and maybe rightly so. Miff, as we know, the main man on Saturday yet again was Daizen Maeda, and I've joked about the fact that I'm getting a wee bit fed up, talking about him. How do you describe him? Maeda magic, Daizen does this, Daizen dazzles. But truth be told, I think we're all absolutely loving what he's doing at this moment in time. He cannot stop scoring. He adds another 2 at the weekend on his 150th appearance for Celtic. That's 30 for the season, including 9 assists. What do you make of his ongoing contribution?
Well, Tino, I'm always delighted to talk about Daizen, as you know, but it would be remiss of me for us to walk past the most exciting development of Sinisalo being in goals, and that is the return of the Baniac to the bench as well. We should also be recognising that as well. These are momentous times. But as far as Maeda goes, I mean, who would have thought after Kyogo leaving we would be in this position where we would be talking about Maeda? His goals were always seen as a little bonus on top of whoever else was scoring, whether that be, going back to somebody like Giakoumakis, O'Reilly, Kyogo, and all these guys, Abada, before. And then all of a sudden, this guy who was supposedly just the workhorse of the team is now providing finishes of remarkable quality in every way possible. There's been a Larson-esque chip. There's been, back post tap-ins. There's been, left-footed finishes for the edge of the box. There's a bit of everything in there, and clearly, even if you look at Jota's goal, his movement, his header, he's very good at finishing with his head as well. He's just, dare I say, he's just a complete striker. And the kind of 180 on that, if you want to call it that, from where we were previously on how we all regarded Daizen as a left-sided workhorse up and down the wing that was mainly in the team for this pressing and setting the tone. No more do we have to worry about that left-footed shank taking out someone in Rosette. We've got someone who's staying between the sticks and confidently finishing the ball with both feet in his head. It's just remarkable, and it just shows you what confidence does to a footballer. Kyogo's exit seems to have emboldened Maeda in believing that he is the man, no doubt backed by Rodgers, and for all that we were howling at the board for reinforcements, and I think we've got every right to do so. What you can't argue with is how readily Daizen Maeda is taking advantage of that and fully taking advantage of it to the point where it's indisputable that he is our number one striker.
Yeah, absolutely. And James Miff talked about confidence there, and it's no more important than in your wingers and your strikers, and Daizen Maeda's kind of a bit of both there. And Rodgers was talking about him, I think it was after the game, he said he's got the full range, as Miff said. He's got right foot, left foot, headers, volleys, chips. He's got the full repertoire. It begs the question, is he Celtic's best striker since Hugo?
Yeah, for the time it's been. I agree with Miff. I think he's the one that he didn't score was probably the best effort. Beating the goalie from that range with no pace on the ball was a phenomenal bit of skill. And then just it drops nicely for Jota. But yeah, I mean, I never fancied him for the main striker role. You know, he plays that for Japan. That's all very well for Japan. I didn't think it was going to be the way it would go for us. But like that first goal, I know Paddy likes Maeda one-on-one, but his percentage rate must have been pretty low for his one-on-ones, I would say. As much as he scored and kept a cool head several times against Rangers, there's been many other times, Bayern Munich included recently, where he's had that one-on-one chance and just taken the wrong option or just not quite composed himself. But there seems to be a switch has gone off in his head that when he goes ahead now, he goes ahead of the last man. He looks like a bit like Cadetti, you know, where Cadetti for me is the best one-on-one striker Celtic have had, and I include Larsson in that. To have that comparison drawn on you, it shows you how highly I think of him. But we do need to be careful of what we lose from him on the left as well. Jota's obviously there. Kuhn, I thought, was coming back into form on Saturday. So there's a good conundrum, and that's always a conundrum. But when it comes to games like a Rangers game, a Bayern Munich game, I want Maeda out in the left there. I want him doing that workhorse stuff, and then you can work out if you want Jota or Kuhn. So it's not a solution forever, is all I would say. I still want a top draw striker signed in the summer. So over to Celtic.
Yeah, and we'll see how that goes. But I wonder if moving forward, Celtic might sign another winger and a striker in the summer, and it might be the case that Daizen Maeda is firmly then a striker and a striker alone. It's going to be interesting to see. I think you talk about natural finishers, and you've mentioned George Cadetti, and obviously Miff mentioned Larsson, and guys like that, and guys maybe like a Frank McAvenny and all these guys. I think they are very much natural finishers, and I don't think Daizen Maeda is a natural finisher. I think he's had to work at it, but clearly whatever he's doing, he is a worker. You know, we know he's got the right attitude, and that combined with Brendan Rodgers, and I wonder if Brendan Rodgers has just given him a bit of confidence and instilled a bit of composure in him. You know, told him, listen, you've got the backing here, but we've got full belief in you. You're a talented guy. Just take a breath. And actually, when he was through on goal on Saturday, he was the coolest man in the house. There was absolutely no doubt he was going to finish. You just felt that that's where his game is at this moment in time. Overall, 150 appearances for Celtic, 59 goals now and 25 assists. But it's amazing to think 59 goals in total, 30 of which have come this season alone. He's having the time of his life. You might have heard the question. I don't know if you lads watched the post-match yesterday or listened. Maybe not. Miff shakes his head. The reason I ask is because I read out a tweet from Paul John. We know Paul John at Axum, and he asked the question. I thought it was an interesting one. Only 8 players in Celtic's history have scored 40 goals or more in a single season for Celtic. I've got them listed here. James, if you've heard, don't worry about it. But Miff, can you name a few of those guys, first of all?
Henrik.
Yep.
Lennox.
Yep.
Exidines?
No.
Griffiths,
yep.
Johnny McBride?
Yes. So you've got 4. So the others are getting into the 80s. So McClare, there's a kind of late 70s one, an 80s one, and a more modern one.
Kloski? No.
Quality street gang type of time. Good pal of Danny McGrain's, Liverpool legend.
Dalglish.
Kerry Dalglish. The other 2, just to finish off, Charlie Nicholas.
Jimmy McGrory. Oh.
Jimmy McGrory, absolutely. Did you get Larsson? Aye. Yeah. So just to confirm, Jimmy McGrory, Joe McBride, Bobby Lennox, Kenny Dalglish, Charlie Nicholas, Brian McClare, Larsson and Lee Griffiths. So the question's been asked by Paul John. Will Daizen Maeda reach the milestone in the remaining maximum of 9 games that we've got this season. James, what do you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
So is it just over 2 he needs to score a game?
Well, he's got 10 goals to score and 9 goals to do it in.
10 goals to score. Oh, yeah, just over 1. Yeah. Yeah, I think he will. He'll get a couple of braces in amongst there as well.
I don't know if you've seen his interview post-match. He's funny in his interviews, and he talks about being very happy and all those kind of things. But he said, it's obviously his attempt at Scottish humour, but he says he was told he was unlucky not to get his hat-trick on the day. He says, don't worry, I'll get a hat-trick next time. He's just very confident in his ability. What do you think, Muff? Is he going to get the 10 goals or more that's required?
Well, if you look at the form that he's in, you mentioned that stat there around, 30 of his 59 goals coming this season. At the rate he's scoring, you would say yes. 10 games, 9 or 10 games left represents an excellent opportunity to do that, and he seems to be in that frame of mind where he's taking the vast majority of chances that come his way. And I would actually say, you mentioned there about the likes of McAvenny being a natural finisher. From what you're seeing from Idah, I think there's more comfort in his finishing when he's playing central. I don't necessarily know what would need to be classed as a natural finish, but if you look at his goals and his efforts on Saturday, that looks to me like somebody that's just born to score goals.
Yeah, I love when people are a bit dismissive about tap-ins. Sometimes you can be fortunate, you just find yourself in the right place during a stramash in the box. But the work that is in for Daizen Maeda's tap-in, for example, the pace that him and Kuhn break at the same time, and I agree with you, James, I think Kuhn's shown signs of potentially returning to form, which is great to see after, I think, some unfair stick, to be honest. But yeah, the pace by Kuhn, you need to be pretty sharp to stay up with that, and obviously the Hearts defenders weren't able to do so, but you can bank on Daizen Maeda having the pace to get there. Times he's run perfectly, stays on side, and yeah, the end result is a tap-in. There's a whole lot goes on before that happens. Miff, I'll ask you the question. Obviously, Maeda is the man of the moment, catching all the headlines, absolutely flying. I've not followed his full career, none of us have, but you'd have to argue he's in the form of his life at this moment in time. What does it mean, though, for Idah? Idah's picked up a lot of, talking points this season. He's been up, he's down, he's expensive price tag. He got his goal for Ireland, the winner for Ireland recently. Then he's out the picture at Celtic, he's back in the picture, and so on and so forth. Does he still have a big part to play at Celtic? And do you think he'll be learning, actually, off Daizen Maeda?
I don't know if you read his comments in the international break. He regards this as his best ever goal scoring season. He seems very happy. Now, whether you think that's a good or a bad thing or not, I think what it indicates is that he is happy and he seems to have accepted his role within the squad. I felt that it was harsh on him. He'd scored 5 games in a row, then was dropped in Munich. Albeit that's what the manager is paid to do, is to make those decisions. But I think there's been a drop-off in him since then. Maybe for a couple of games you could understand that, but he seems to be one of those he's very sensitive to the decisions that are made round about him, and it seems to affect him for a prolonged period of time. I was at the St Mirren game, and Rodgers was on his case constantly. The St Mirren away game.
Right.
He was on his case constantly. Now, after that, during the international break, Idah has then talked up Rodgers. So I think there is obviously a mutual respect and understanding there where Idah at least is emotionally intelligent enough. Rodgers is trying to improve him, and Rodgers is thinking that's the best way. He has to be on him to take the most out of him. So there's clearly a good working relationship.
I pick up on that as well, Miff. I think the working relationship is good, and the fact that Rodgers is on his case shows you that Rodgers rates him as a player. I mean, I think when the manager stops being on your case, that's when you get a problem, and that he's maybe giving up on you. But I think he does. We touched on it last week a wee bit. I think he's got the talent, that sensitivity to what's going on around about him, pick stuff. If he wants to make it as a pro, that he needs to knock that right out of his game, because the only way you're going to get the number 9 shirt and be the number 1 striker is to perform when you do get your chance and not come on. I think he's a hard worker. I think he does a lot of work off the ball.
Yeah,
he maybe needs to take a bit of Giakoumakis and just stay between the posts for a while and just score goals. Going away out to the wing and bringing balls in and giving other guys chances when he should be just testing the goalie himself. I think those kind of things will all add to his confidence. So, obviously Celtic are asking him to do more than just stay between the posts, but it might be good for him for a short period to just stay in that 6-yard box, score the goals, and not worry about too much,
I think that's an interesting one, because I was watching him closely when he came on Saturday, and I thought he put in a lot of work. And I think it's a myth that he doesn't work hard, or he's lazy and he doesn't look interested. As Miff said, he's talking up the manager. He seems to be in a good place. He's got his 14 goals for the season, and there's a good chance he would break the 20-goal mark, which is pretty decent for what is your backup striker. But I do think you've seen the examples at the weekend. He was coming out wide. He was actually trying to be more of a provider at the weekend. There was a couple of chances, and there would have been half chances where some strikers would have taken on the shot, and he's a lack of confidence. Maybe he's been told, if things aren't firing on all cylinders just now, maybe just try and back up your mates and provide. I'm not too sure, but I agree. I wonder if just staying between the sticks for a while, but maybe that's just not how Celtic play. And maybe the manager's saying, be selfless, don't worry about the crowd noise, don't worry about what the Ireland fans are saying. I know what you're doing for this team. But it's an interesting one, Miff, because I don't think there's any doubt another striker will come in the summer. It should have happened in January. A striker will land in summer, and that'll put more pressure on him. Do you feel he's here for at least the short to medium term? Do you feel optimistic about Idah's chances for Celtic?
Yeah, and again, he's still relatively young. I don't look now. I think I'm taking my steer off the player. If we compare this to what Giakoumakis was like in a similar position, he wanted to be the alpha. He wanted to be the number one. And as a result, he thought, right, well, if I'm going to sit on the bench, give me more money. Didn't get it, and took his move and went elsewhere. Now, I don't think there's really any of us have a problem with that attitude. I think it's understandable. Elite athletes want to be the main man, and Giakoumakis, in fairness to him, carried us when Kyogo was out injured and fired us to a title, and probably thought he was owed a wee bit more of a run in the team. But by the same token, we found that weakened us significantly when we lost Giakoumakis. We then had Olo, and who was quite raw. I think as fans, it's okay to maybe be a wee bit uncomfortable, the attitude of being happy to be second best. But I think Idah was treated really poorly in his final days at Norwich. Even prior to coming to us, he was kind of getting managed out the door. I think there's probably quite a decent marriage here of a player who wants to come and develop under the manager and the coach, who understands the demands of the club, but also is happy to support the squad in his current role. I would hope that changes and he wants to kick on and be number one and shows a run of form that grants that. But in the meantime, what we have is working, because we have good, we can change between both. We can use horses for courses. And when Maeda's in the form that he's in, Rodgers is kind of damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. He's got a guy in Maeda who's scoring for fun. If he moves him back out to the left, immediately the questions would be asked, well, why did you do that? So I just think it's a really intriguing one. I think for now it works, but I agree with you, Tino. I agree with your point. We've all been crying out for another striker. If we get one, what's the impact there? So yeah, interesting times coming up. But one thing's for sure, progress shouldn't be halted. If there's better out there, let's get them in.
Yes, it's got to be the way, and it always will be the way at Celtic. And as an interesting one, it does work for now, for the here and now, and for the immediate future in terms of getting over the line in the league and hopefully the Scottish Cup. It's absolutely fine. And I like the fact that Adam is a young player. I think he's 23. But some players in that position might throw the toys out the pram. He doesn't seem to be doing that at all. And if his quotes from just a week ago are anything to go by, he's happy, if that's the right word, to play back up for now. But that won't always be the case. So we'll see what happens there in the short and in the medium term. In terms of more positive news as well, really big boost for Celtic to have two guys return from injury at the weekend. It was Paulo Bernardo. He was back in the squad for the first time since February the 8th. And James Forrest, who was back for the first time since the League Cup final way back on the 15th of December. James, how important could those lads be in the chase for the treble?
Huge, and I think they've been sorely missed. I think the stat someone threw out was that we played 8 games in the time that Bernardo was out, and we won 3 of them. We didn't win 5 of those games, which is, really important. I'll need to check that because that doesn't sound right in my head. But I think Bernardo's such a classy player. You know, very stingy in possession. You know, I listened to it was Peter Grant, I think, was doing the co-commenting. They were actually keeping an eye on him specifically in terms of his ball retention. I don't think he gave the ball away once. All of his passes were to feet, and they weren't just safe passes. You know, he's looking to break lines and get forward. I think he's a really intelligent footballer, very versatile, and he's been missed. You know, I want to kind of speak for kind of Luke McCowan as well in this, because I think he'll have been dented by his performance against Rangers. And Bernardo, for me, would be ahead of McCowan in the pecking order. And Bernardo was missed in that game badly. But I do think McCowan has a bit of, you know, a strong mentality where what you were talking about last week about what got you here won't get you there. So what got McCowan to Celtic won't necessarily get him first 11 in Rangers the next time. So he's got to go and work on his mindset, his mentality on the training ground, off the pitch, the whole thing. And I think he's the kind of guy that will do that. So just a wee word for him. But Bernardo specifically, class player. And then Jamesy coming on, shore it up, see the game out, try and sneak that 15th in a row goal, you know. Any penalties from now on, they're Jamesy's.
I'll get to that in just a moment. Just in terms of the stats, so yeah, 8 games missing for Paulo Bernardo. Celtic won 4 of them. We lost 3 and we drew 1. So whether you attribute that directly to Bernardo's absence, it certainly doesn't help Miff having a player of that quality missing. James is focused a wee bit on Bernardo in terms of his return, Miff. I'll let you take up the reins for James Forrest. I know you're a fan.
Yeah, and it was just great to see him. Great to see him back out there. And dare I say, you know, he's been missed just for his reliability more than anything else. I think what everyone, even James, has come to appreciate in the past 12 to 18 months is that ability to play that position within the system. And, you know, somebody like Yang taking so long to settle, who's clearly a very, very talented lad, by the way, just shows you how hard it is to do that. You know, if you're then denied a winger in Forrest and a midfielder in Bernardo who brings such balance and reliability to the squad, you know, you could argue both of them are similar in terms of the impact they have in their roles. It did. I felt it did create a wee bit of an imbalance in the squad, and probably a bit more expected from players that we maybe shouldn't have been expecting things from. Mainly in Yang and McCowan, because they're still settling in and finding their way. But over the piece, I mean, a Celtic squad with a fit James Forrest is far stronger than it is without.
Yeah, and I think even though you were right about Bernardo at the weekend, James, he came on and just kept possession, kept it ticking along, kept it tidy. Very interesting that it was he who sat in the Callum McGregor role and not Engels, which maybe indicates that Engels was there against Rangers as a needs must. McGregor wasn't available, Bernardo wasn't available, and on that day Engels had to be that guy. There was no other choice. And now seems to be the case that we know Callum McGregor can do the 6, and it looks like Bernardo is the next preferred choice in that position. I was wrong with the stat. I've said it a couple of times. He has now scored in 15 seasons. He's targeting a 16th, which is just incredible. It's such a record in its own right. And as we know, James Forrest is Celtic's second most decorated player. He's on 24 medals, 1 behind Bobby Lennox with 25. He is undoubtedly, a modern day Celtic great. I've got an interesting question, James. You mentioned penalties. Question comes from Gary on Instagram. Gary's been in touch a few times and we've had a good back and forward. And he asked the question, it's the last game of the season. The game's won and Celtic get a penalty, but who's taking it? James Forrest to make it 16 consecutive goal-scoring seasons for Celtic, or Daizen Maeda for his 40th goal of the campaign and to join that illustrious list of Celtic greats? I'll come to you first, James. Who gets it?
Greg Taylor.
Greg Taylor, send-off.
Yeah, that's it.
So obviously, and it's hypothetical before everyone says, oh, Arne Engels is a penalty taker. What are you talking about? It's just a bit of fun, right? So who are you going with, James, if it is one of those two?
Jamesy. Yep, definitely. There's always next season for Daizen, the season after and the season after. You know, when you get to Jamesy's time of life in the game, you just don't know how long you've got to go. So, but Jamesy for me.
Yeah, what about yourself, Miff?
Jamesy, got to be.
No doubt about it.
And by the way, I think we all know Daizen would hand him the ball. I don't have any doubt about that at all.
You could see something like that happen, and I think
I don't have any doubt. Yeah, I honestly don't. I think. I mean, you mentioned there he's a modern great. for many years very underappreciated. Very frustrating as well, by the way. I'm not, it's not always been perfect, but I think that, with maturity has come more appreciation of what his skills are and what he brings to the team. But I just love him, as you know. I'm well on record as that. And yeah, I just loved seeing him back in the park again. He get the old standing ovation for me. I was right up at my seat.
What I like about him, and I've said this before, is the evolution of James Forrest's game. He's no longer the real pacey, lively winger who'll bomb to the byline. He's just got more about him than that. As such, he's very good, but his first touch is excellent. He kills it dead in his first touch. He's always in control of it. And I actually think one of the key things that he offers now is retention of the ball for Celtic. It's in a different way to Bernardo in terms of what he done at the weekend. He comes on in the centre of the park and just keeps it rotating and keeps it ticking along. But James Forrest done similar. I'd need to watch it back, but he just got it, kept it. He didn't have any huge impact. Obviously, there was no goals or assists at the weekend for him when he came on. He came on, I think it was in the 81st minute, but he just kept the ball ticking over and played his part and seen out the win. And as it does seem to be a bit of a newfound maturity myth. He does seem to have kind of found a different part of his game, but it's an important part of his game because in this potential 9-game running, there's a game at Ibrox which has kind of become a must-win for Celtic and for different reasons. There's a Scottish Cup semi-final, which is a huge game against St Johnstone, and if Celtic manage to get through that, there's another cup final for James Forrest on the horizon. And these are important games where you require your full squad. James Forrest cannot do what Nicholas Kuhn does or what Daizen Maeda does or Jota does, but likewise he can do things that they can, and he's got an important part to play in these games.
Absolutely. I mean, I think as well, James, I think it was you that said that at the time when we beat Cali for the treble, Forrest and McGregor were really influential at that time. So we probably take for granted just how he is viewed by his peers in the squad and how much of a boost it is to them to see him on the bench. So yeah, I don't think it can be underestimated just how much a positive impact it is. And by the way, I throw Bernardo in there as well. His quality is clear for all to see, and we had regarded his season as a bit underwhelming before he got injured. I think everybody would admit that, probably the player himself, I would assume. Maybe not quite hit the heights his initial loan season, but we have really missed his reliability and his class in there, and there is no doubt games recently that he would have played a major part in with what he brings to the table as well. So yeah, for me, both players really have a lot to offer in this run-in, because one thing's for sure, the way things have happened in the result against Rangers specifically, I think there'll be a wee bit of annoyance there at the team. Many players new to this kind of footballing city would be thinking, what's the big deal? 13 points clear by how many games left? What's the problem? You're beat off a team that's miles behind you. Now they know and understand that you just do not lose those games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it reminds me of, was it Alistair Johnson last season? Celtic beat Ross County 1-0 in a game at Celtic Park. And there was a wee bit of booing. There was a bit of disgruntlement at the end of the game. And you could see Alistair Johnson, the lip readers kind of picked up him, basically saying, what's going on here? We've won. And I think there's guys now in the squad that are new to it in terms of, Arnie Engels, Austin Trusty, less so Luke McCowan, of course. He knows what it's all about. Bernardo should know by now, and a few other guys, Yang, for example. And yeah, it's just life at Celtic. And as I say, that game at Ibrox, for example, a must win, not for points, not for goal difference, not for anything like that, just because it's how it works in Glasgow. And it's going to be interesting if we can go there with a full squad. But in terms of Paulo Bernardo and James Forrest, massive boost to have them back. And hopefully they've got a big part to play in the run-in. Before we kick on to the next section, we've been contacted recently by a Chris McLaughlin, not the BBC journalist Chris McLaughlin, someone else, who's part of a group who are working on a cause for the potential canonisation of Tommy Burns. If that's successful, Tommy could go on to be recognised as a saint by the Catholic Church. And to help Chris and his group with this, they're looking to speak to anybody who may have any stories or who may have experienced any acts of kindness by Tommy Burns during his life. In particular, they're also keen to find out who John Paul Connor was or is. And John Paul Connor was the name of the boy that Tommy famously mentioned in his interview on the park after the 1988 centenary year final. It's quite a famous interview. I think it's Jim White that does it, and he says he was going to visit John Paul up in the hospital and he'll be up soon. And I think they're looking to track down John Paul. So if John Paul is out there, or if somebody knows him, or if you've experienced acts of kindness, please do get in touch. You can contact Chris and his team directly on contact@tommyburns.org, or you can get in touch with us here at the Celtic Exchange, and we'll pass on any messages to Chris and his team. To finish off, and certainly one of the kind of final sections of this week's show, Miff, sadly for you and maybe sadly for the player, Greg Taylor's time at Celtic looks up. Unless there's a massive turnaround in the remaining games, then it seems to be all but over, with Brendan Rodgers saying that it looks more likely than not they'll be moving on in the summer. Miff, how do you think it's been handled by all parties, and do you think it's just the right move at the right time for all concerned?
Well, firstly, I like Taylor. I would have preferred him to stay. I know I'm probably in the minority now for that, but yeah, I think, again, the word has been mentioned many times in this particular podcast, and that is of reliability. So I would have liked him to have stayed, because I think he would have been the perfect understudy to Kieran Tierney. However, Greg Taylor quite rightly does not want to be Kieran Tierney's understudy, and that's why he's leaving. I think there's a direct correlation between a breakdown in the talks and the confirmation that Kieran Tierney was coming home. Again, I would look at it for the point of view that you're not going to be guaranteed to get a full season out of Tierney, just with the way his body is, unfortunately. So I would have hoped that some sort of agreement could have come into play for that. But Greg Taylor's his own man, and he obviously thinks, well, I want to be number one left back somewhere, and away he goes. How's it been handled? Probably not great. I think the club have kind of left him to be hung out to dry a wee bit. He was already a bit of a target for a certain element of our support. And any mistake, which was already getting magnified, was then getting magnified further. So I think it had the potential to get a wee bit toxic. I think the signing of Schlupp was a very wise one, just for the point of view of having another body in there to play the games rather than Taylor, because you would have felt it. You know, can you imagine Taylor was the left back in the Rangers game, for example? I don't think it'd have been very pretty.
Yeah, James, the quotes from Brendan Rodgers post-match on Saturday, he said, amongst other things, that it's not a financial thing with Greg Taylor, which is interesting in itself. So that maybe says that it's not so much a case of Celtic not offering him the money that he wants. Maybe they couldn't guarantee him the game time that he wants. He's at a stage and an age in his career, I think he's 27, maybe 28. He wants to play. He needs to play. You know, at that age, you're signing probably your biggest or your best or your final big contract of your career before you get into your 30s. And he maybe, as Miff says, just doesn't want to come and play second fiddle. But I wonder if just at Brendan Rodgers' side, as soon as the realisation dawned that was it, he's been cast aside. He's not played a single minute for Celtic since he got hooked at half-time in that 2-1 loss to Hibs back on the 22nd of February. So he's effectively been out the team for a month with no appearances. What do you think, as I say, just in terms of how it's handled by both parties, and is it the right time to move along?
Yeah, still at the end, I think it's the right time to move along. I don't think the club have handled this terribly badly. I'm not really in agreement there. I think his agents overplayed his hand at times. The strange one for me is Taylor brings a lot to the party, but he's a liability as a left back, as a defender. That's the long story short. I think he does an awful lot when he's allowed to invert. He does an awful lot when he gets into midfield positions. He causes that chaos that Robbo talks about, and he's put in some excellent deliveries this season included, this year included, or just turn of the year, Aberdeen in December, to make match-winning passes for match-winning goals. So, you know, he's quite a complicated player to assess, but if you look at the bare minimum job he's got to do is be a strong left back, he's not, and that's where it becomes a bit pointless. You know, he was a midfielder that became a left back. I don't know if that was the right move. Should he just stayed as a kind of a left mid? Who knows? But he's just not strong enough for Celtic to be competing in Europe against absolute monsters. Schlupp can handle that. Tierney can handle that. I don't think Taylor can. You don't want to see any certainly no sniping from the stands, and you don't want to see him going out in anything but a positive, because he's been a good servant. So hopefully we can get things tied up and understood. Everyone knows what's happening, and he can come and play a bit of a part, you know, in the last few games, and be there as part of the title celebrations as someone who's contributed so much over the years, but just not good enough for that left back role.
Yeah, he certainly deserves, you know, the accolades and the rewards for what he's put in this season as much as anything. It is an interesting debate, the midfielder v defender thing, because I think he is pretty tidy in the ball. He gives you an out ball in that midfield, and he can link up play very well. He's tidy, as a ball player. But first and foremost, if you play left back, your first job is to defend, and he does struggle with some of the basics there. He can't be any bigger. I've joked about this before. He's all the height he's going to be, but you can see. I know, but you can see in a Jeffrey Schlupp the power and the strength and just the physique on the guy, and that makes a huge difference at the top level, particularly if Celtic have aspirations to go toe-to-toe with Bayern Munich and other Champions League sides. But I think, I'll finish it by asking you guys, how should he be remembered for his time at Celtic? There's been ups and downs in the journey, but he's won 10 trophies, and he'll be adding to that, all going well over the next few weeks and couple of months. And he's played a part since his arrival under, I think it was Lenny that signed him in 2019. Miff, how should he be remembered by the Celtic fan base?
He's a very good player for Celtic in a very successful period. I think he was one of the players that was able to help Ange kind of bring his philosophy to bear on the team, especially in the early days. But I've enjoyed watching him play. I know sometimes in Europe he was probably a wee bit overmatched, but in general, I think he's been an excellent servant to Celtic. It'll be interesting to see where it goes next and to what level, because quite often we've seen players leave in recent history. Two of our highest profile exits recently, in Kyogo and Matt O'Reilly, have struggled massively since they've left us, albeit for seemingly different reasons. So I would say I will watch that with interest, because I hope he goes on to do really, really well. He leaves with nothing but my best wishes.
Yeah, I think so, absolutely. So who knows? He could still have a part to play, and he certainly earned any medals that Celtic do pick up. The big hope is that we complete the treble, and Greg Taylor would deserve his thanks for his part in that and for everything he's done during his time at Celtic. So it looks like the clock's ticking, but we'll see what part he's got to play in these remaining games. Last big question for today, and it's another guy who seems to split opinion. It's Maik Nawrocki. He came in against Rangers right out the cold against Rangers 2 weeks ago, and actually was one of the few guys that got pass marks on the day. The debate will rage on as to maybe the lack of offensive work he'd done the day. He wasn't hugely brave in terms of making that big pass or breaking the lines or getting forward. But I've just mentioned there, your first job is to defend. And actually against Rangers, he done his job defensively pretty well. I was really surprised, though, that he retained his place at the weekend, because Austin Trusty was deemed fit. I think my general take is, if you're fit enough for the bench, you're fit. If you're not able to take your place in the bench, you shouldn't be there at all, because what if someone gets injured in the first 5 minutes? Are you there or are you not there? And I thought the fact that Austin Trusty was going to be fit for the game, Brendan Rodgers said so on Friday. My taking of that was it would be a case of, thanks for what you done the other week, Mike, but you're back out again because I don't rate you. He kept his place, and there's been a few different comments since. Brendan Rodgers did speak about the fact that he likes a left-sided centre-half there, whether it's Scales or Trusty, and a right-sided partner next to him, Carter Vickers or otherwise. James, what do you think? I'll ask it just in short. Does Maik Nawrocki have a future at Celtic?
No. I think if he was scouted for the last two games, particularly the Rangers game, he wouldn't be getting recommended to any managers. It's all very well coming in and being safe, but your job as a Celtic centre-half is to create, to start moves. I don't knock him for the way he played against Rangers. He was thrown in there, absolute lion's den with no real notice given. And I thought he performed well, but you could tell he's just saying, don't make an arse of it. Don't make any mistakes. I thought he actually could have been slightly better at the winning goal, Tringaman. But by and large, he did a decent defensive game, and he did another decent defensive game on Saturday, although it would be hard to tell given how little Hearts brought to the game in the second half. What he did have to do in the first half was perfectly competent. But there's more to being a Celtic centre-half than just being safe. This word from what we hear at Celtic is that he's a fine player, but he can't handle the physicality, both in terms of when he's up against it and playing physical football week in, week out, twice a week. His body can't take it, and he's picking up a lot of injuries. So all those things considered, he's not going to make it at Celtic. But I'm not over convinced by Trusty, so I think there's still work to be done there.
If Brendan Rodgers speaks extremely highly about him as an individual in terms of his attitude and the way he trains and the way that generally he carries himself, it can't be much fun when you train all week. That's your job to do so, knowing that you won't be anywhere near it at the weekend. All of a sudden, he's absolutely near it to the point that he's now starting games. And as I say there, I actually think his direct competition isn't Austin Trusty. I think it's Cameron Carter-Vickers. And even though Carter-Vickers has been a wee bit off form and had a couple of moments recently, you're not budging him anytime soon. So I don't know. I don't know where Nawrocki fits. I would lean towards James. I think he deserves a lot of credit for a lot of reasons, but I don't see him having a future at Celtic. But do you see otherwise?
Yes, I do. I find the way he has been treated is fairly bizarre, because I would go as far to say is that I think he's got potential to be better than Trusty in skills. That's just my opinion. I think our third goal on Saturday comes from a decisive pass played by him into midfield. I think that the reason he played so safe against Rangers was because it was his first game and he was aware of how big a game it was. He was just erring on the side of caution. I do genuinely think there's more to come from him. That's my take on it. You know, Trusty has done well in parts, but I think at times, especially facing his own goal, Trusty looks really indecisive and uncertain. Lets the ball bounce and you know, turns his back on his opponent. You're always taught as a centre half, kids don't let the ball bounce, meet it. You know, all those kind of basics he seems to ignore. So that worries me slightly. Scales, I just think Scales is a good player to a point, but there's a bit of a ceiling there. With Nawrocki, I take the point about the physicality. You know, we simply don't know because we don't have enough evidence in terms of our run of games. I suppose my point would be, I think we would look on Nawrocki a bit better had he had similar opportunity to what Scales and Trusty have had. But I completely accept the point about a left-sided centre half. You know, you want the team balanced, and if anything, probably the thing that goes against Nawrocki the most is that requirement to turn back in. You know, he closes his body off when he receives the ball naturally to come back into the right hand side rather than open it up when there's so many times he could play that ball directly out to Jota or whoever's on the left wing. So listen, I get the components of it. I get all the wee things that make it up, but to my eye, as I watch the game, you know, I find it baffling that his opportunities have been so limited.
In the same way that Liam Scales and Austin Trusty are very, very left-footed, I think Nawrocki does look like he's very right-footed, but there's a point I've made there. I'm a huge advocate of players only being fully judged when they've had a decent run of games. Now, my gut feeling, my judgment right here and now is that it won't be, you know, there won't be a future for Nawrocki at Celtic, but I've banged the drum in recent times that Yang needed that run of games to prove that there is a player there, and I think most folk now agree there is a player. But that question, if that was doing the rounds in October, November, December, when Yang was in and out, everyone wrote him off, and maybe rightly so based on the evidence to hand. But now that he gets a run of games and starts to show what he can really do, people say, oh, hold on a minute, Yang's got something. Maybe the same applies to Maik Nawrocki and everybody in football. But that's, again, it's just life at Celtic. You don't get those opportunities. You might only get a couple of windows, a couple of chances to prove it. Liam Scales was thrown in. We didn't plan to play with Liam Scales, and all of a sudden he finds himself in at the start of last season, and lo and behold, he's a title winner and whatever else. He's now an international footballer, and I think Liam Scales has got a ceiling, but we might not have seen any of Liam Scales had things gone differently. Last question on it then, just to close this one out. James, my gut feeling is that Celtic need another right-sided centre-half and another left-sided centre-half. I don't think we've nailed those positions down, and I know you've got some concerns over Carter-Vickers. I think he can still be the man for us moving forward, but I don't like the fact there is zero legitimate competition for him. So that's not good for the player, and it's not good for us on the odd occasion. I think he played 7 of Celtic's 10 Champions League games, for example. So when you're missing him, the reserve option doesn't seem to be as good as you'd hope. So what's your feeling? Do we need a new left and right? What's your feeling in that area?
You know, my first hope with these things is to look to the youth. You know, Murray's come back from a really, really horrendous injury there. So great to see him back playing football at all. We obviously recalled him after Welsh went out on loan. We haven't seen much of him at all, certainly not as much as I would have hoped. That he might be the one to push Carter Vickers, but part of that might be just watching the load of his body, you know, as he gets back to first team fitness or full fitness. So, question mark, I'd hope it would be Murray, but certainly we need to sign cover, because it's not just cover, it's who's going to take that jersey if and when Carter Vickers gets to a point in his career where he's not quite as fast or as fit or whatever kind of thing. So there's work to be done there. I think Trusty's a reserve left-sided centre half, not first choice for me. And the choice isn't in the building.
Right. Miff, your own short response to that, a new left and right needed, or are the guys in the building, to use that term?
Well, given what I've said, I'd like to see Nawrocki granted more of a chance before I'd make a decision on that. I think there's more to come from him, but I don't deny we need, you know, for me, neither Trusty nor Scales are the answer to the I say the issue that we have, but I'm looking at this purely through the prism of progress in Europe. We will need an upgrade, probably possibly even in Carter Vickers as well.
Yeah, and we'll maybe revisit this Nawrocki question and others towards the end of the season. Before we close out the show, I just want to offer a big congratulations to Celtic artist Jim Scullion, who on Friday launched a very special exhibition at Summerlee Heritage Centre in Coatbridge, featuring artwork by himself, but also by two special friends in Tony Roper and Danny McGrain. The three of those guys meet regularly at Celtic Park every Tuesday, I believe, for they work on their art. And the exhibition will be opened over at Summerlee over the next 3 months. Jim's a really brilliant guy. I've got to know him quite recently. All going well. He's going to come on the show at one point for a chat. But in the meantime, be sure to check out that exhibition over at Summerlee. Really great stuff, and amazing to see some of the artwork by a Danny McGrain that we think of as a phenomenal footballer, also a pretty handy artist as well. But Jim, extremely talented guy. So good luck to Jim and the guys in terms of the exhibition. James, we're closing this one out for the week. What's your final comments?
Yeah, it's just 2.5 games or something to win. Nearly was less than that on Saturday evening, but last minute winners are last minute winners. And so next game, St Johnstone. Just a wee comment for St Johnstone. You know, they're probably not the club I would have picked to want to be down. I'm a big Cosgrove fan, and that'll be a tough one for him. But it looks like the writing's on the wall for St Johnstone, and we're only going to really add to that as we move to secure the title. But that's just football, isn't it? So looking forward to it. Get another game under the belt, next one, and then the next one, it's all done. Yeah,
my final word goes to you.
Yes, and Johnson been in the league for as long as I can remember as a boy. So they've kind of punched above their weight thanks to the support of the Brown family for many, many years. Also quite sad that it'll be Simo Valakari at the reins that takes him down. Somewhat of a Motherwell cult hero is Simo from his time there. A wee shout out, if I can indulge you, Tino, was at a 40th and a good friend's 40th on Saturday night. We've got an avid listener, Mick Mullen, and he'd asked me after I inebriated a few drinks if I could get a shout out. So Mick, there you go, mate. Hope you've listened right to the end. But yeah, really much looking forward to the weekend. I think Saturday was just important. It felt like a good wee sort of reset, and you know, for me, McGregor back, Kuhn looking very, very lively. You know, all those things. It bodes really well for this last final burst that we've got to go. Some reinforcements coming back in. You know, the sun's shining again.
Absolutely. I mean, if there's every chance that Mick switched off after about 20 odd minutes, but if not, big shout to Mick Mullen, and thanks to Mick and all others that continue to support us here at the Celtic Exchange. That wraps things up on this latest episode of the Celtic Exchange Weekly. Thanks to James and Miff, and thanks to you for tuning in. We'll be back with more shows later this week as we bring you our latest recording with the Manhattan CSC as part of our CSC Stories series. That comes out on Wednesday. And also our match preview on Friday ahead of Celtic St Johnstone at the weekend. And remember to check out the Celtic Exchange Plus for ad-free listening, early access to this Celtic Exchange Weekly show, and various other member benefits. Just visit the celticexchange.supercast.com or click the link in the show notes. But in the meantime, have a brilliant week. We'll see you all again really soon.